The establishment loves to describe Australia as the most successful multicultural country in the world. They make this claim based on things like educational attainment and people's responses to surveys. But is it actually true? And what is multiculturalism anyway? The left would tell you it's a magical system of sunshine and rainbows, a utopia of peace and love where everyone of all races and ethnicities meet and mingle and it's all just great. Oh, and if you disagree, you're a wascally racist poopy head. Haven't you seen the food? It's amazing. You can get something from all corners of the planet and it's only a web order away. This is a complete load of nonsense, of course. The truth is, multiculturalism is nothing more than the replacement of an ethnic monoculture with multiple ethnic cultures. The result is always ethnic segregation, tribalism, and conflict. This happens because ethnicity is more than just skin colour and nice food. It's actually our genetic heritage. It's literally built into our DNA. People either integrate into wider society and mix with the ethnic majority, or they set up their own ethnic enclaves and communities. There is no other option, which is why Australia is fast becoming a nation of tribes battling each other for influence and territory. Recently in Australia, we've had two big stories that show exactly how our society is fracturing along these ethnic lines, and it doesn't even involve mass immigration. Before we continue, for some amazing karma, please check out Subscribestar, where for as little as $5 a month you can support my work and help save Western civilization. The first incident occurred at an all-star rugby league match between Australian Aborigines and New Zealand Maoris. Yes, we should ask the question as to why there is no Anglo-Australian or Kiwi All-Stars team, but for the purposes of this video, we will just leave that on the table. We all know the answer anyway. And I quote, "NRL fans have been divided over the controversial moment the Indigenous All Stars team did not sing the Australian national anthem ahead of their clash with the New Zealand Maori All Stars team on Friday night at Amy Park in Melbourne. The pre-game entertainment was a rich celebration of Aboriginal and Maori cultures, but many fans could not look past the moment Channel 9 cameras showed seemingly the entire Indigenous team choosing not to sing Advance Australia Fair after the New Zealand side had earlier sung God Defend New Zealand." One might think these Indigenous players would show a little bit of deference and respect to our national anthem, considering the fact that if it weren't for white settlement, they'd never be well-paid elite athletes. If these privileged individuals wish to live in a remote community away from European civilization that they so clearly dislike, then that is their God-given right, after all. Nobody should ever stop anyone from making this choice of their own free will. However, you cannot retain the cake and eat it at the same time, after all. Understandably, this has divided people, with a News Limited straw poll showing 60% of respondents disagreeing with the refusal to sing and 40% agreeing with it. Such is the result of playing this kind of divisive political game, but it's also inevitable. This is remarkably similar to the Colin Kaepernick incident way back in 2016, an act that divided the United States and saw NFL attendance numbers drop significantly. He showed his distaste for the country that made him a millionaire by kneeling for the US national anthem, and the public did not receive it well.
NFL fans in Sacramento got fired up as the Star Spangled Banner played out in local bars and restaurants, and Kaepernick stayed on his knee.
It just pisses me off. You know, I'm just frustrated by that. I mean, I get it. He gets the right to do what he wants to do and protest it. It still pisses me off.
How many times have we called upon our military to protect us or give us our freedoms? And our flag and anthem always have to be respected, period.
Because it takes attention away from the proud men and women in that community who serve where the attention should be.
This shows how reasonable people respond in the face of a complete lack of gratitude for gifts granted. How many young children are right now dreaming of playing the sport they love as a professional athlete when they grow up? How many of those kids actually make it in the end? Elite athletes are a fraction of those who actually play the sport from a young age. When elite athletes show no appreciation for this blessing, the paying public are right to be annoyed. Contrast this to the Maori team, who proudly sung their national anthem and showed full respect to the country of which they are a part. If there was no Australian nation, there would be no stadium, no rugby, and no NRL. That is a fact. Moving on to the next story. Here we travel to the South Australian outback, where a small white community in a remote opal mining town called MintABI is having a run-in with tribal political correctness. And I quote, "Last year, the South Australian government moved to terminate the lease arrangement of the town 8 years early. Come July 1st, all those living in the predominantly white township must depart, leaving their homes and businesses behind and handing back control to the executive board of the Anangu, otherwise known as the APY, lands." Yes, you heard that correctly. The government is forcing these people to move out of their homes because they are white. They built a small community to produce gemstones, and now they have to leave for no other reason than their genetic heritage. But it gets worse, and I quote, "For Luka Sumanovic, the opal miner and smiling face behind the bar at remote South Australia's MintABI Hotel, freedom is more precious than any of the sparkling gemstones he's pried from the rocky earth." Luke said, "When communism took over, my father didn't believe he should give his property to the state, and they killed him for it. It makes me emotional because now it looks like that's my destiny too." This poor man fled communism to build a better life. Little did he expect that communists would subvert this country too. For him, there appears to be no escaping Marxist hell. And then there's this. Since the decision, many in the town have reported a spike in criminal activity. Tubby Minors and Progress Association chairwoman and owner of the MintABI Trading Post, Robin Lloyd Grucock, claims the Anangu have taken news of the pending closure as a green light to do whatever they like. Lloyd Grucock packed up her things and left the town for good 2 weeks ago, saying her business had become unviable due to a steady stream of break-ins and ransacking. What reason could the South Australian government possibly have for kicking these poor people out? Could it be for reasons of safety of the community, or even something like the need to build a military base? No. Those would make it justified. The reason is native victimhood. And I quote, "APY Land's General Manager Richard King says the real issue at play isn't discrimination, but the fact that townspeople have degraded the environment with deep mine shafts and contaminated water to the point that it is dangerous for Anangu to practice their traditions there. Both Labor and Liberal should be commended for this decision," he says. "They, the residents, were engaging in various activities that really put the Anangu in danger and were taking advantage. The real victims are the Aboriginal people, who have had to deal with their culture being abused by this little group that has been allowed to exist on the edge. We need to make the area safe and have a full assessment of the environmental degradation that's occurred." That's right, a tiny little town of just over 2,000 people sitting in a territory the size of England is having a devastating effect on the Aborigines who hold title over it. Title handed to them by the High Court of Australia in 1992, mind you, and then formalised into law in 1993. It's not the people having their homes confiscated and livelihoods destroyed on the basis of their race who are the victims, it's apparently the people who are doing the race-based destroying. It's not like the Anangu people could simply move to a different part of their massive piece of land or anything. They need to ruin the lives of innocent people because victimhood. That is to say, there is nothing wrong or bad about Aborigines practicing their own traditions and enjoying their own culture. If they choose it, that is their right. However, when they use their own racial identity to deny property rights of others based on theirs, the only result is conflict and resentment. Black trumps white in this case, and that's the only way one can describe it. Anti-white racism is clearly the last and only acceptable form of racism. That is, if we ignore the fact that the term racist is literally a communist invention designed to attack whites for daring to protect their own ethnic heritage and culture. This is multiculturalism in a nutshell. It is the division and tribalisation of people based on their race within a single territory. The common counter to acts like this is to say, well, white Europeans stole the land, it will always be Aboriginal land, to which the response is simple. Whites settled and created Australia. We built a civilization here, and the land is Western property by rights. Especially urban and farming areas developed by us, such as the small opal mining town known as MintABI. Native title even grants Aborigines rights over large territories and access to mining royalties. If they wish to practice their own cultures and tradition, they certainly have that right, and it would be immoral to stop them. But it is also immoral to destroy a community because they don't have the right genetic heritage. White Australian taxpayers fund Aboriginal communities to the tune of tens of billions a year without any say on the matter. It is not much to ask that our remote communities remain free to live their own lives. If this trend continues towards multicultural tribalism, the result will be a system where people of different races separate and live entirely by their own laws and customs. In other words, literal apartheid. Perhaps even the formation of new sovereign nations. It won't just be whites and Aborigines either. It will be people of all ethnicities segregated into their own territories. This is what happens in a multicultural system pushed by cultural Marxists. Societies divide and then there is conflict. If that's what the establishment calls a success, God help us if it ever fails. Thanks for watching, share the truth around, and I'll see ya when I see ya. Just a quick shout out to Adam Piggott for the tip on both these stories. Check out his blog, Pushing Rubber Downhill, link in the description.